Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
And I'm your host today, Kris from OGC Solutions, and really excited to talk about software in the printing market and the packaging markets. In particular, everybody who thinks about software these days, I think as a knee-jerk, if nothing else, wants to hear about powering software with AI and harnessing the value and the features and the value and more productivity and other things with AI. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and focusing a little bit more on who our guest is today. We got Kris Hanchette, who's the president of EngView Systems. And welcome to the podcast, Kris.
Hey, thanks, Kris. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. I've said it before on some of the episodes that we've done that the printing and the packaging industries are fascinating for lots of reasons, but especially now as providers like EngView spend their time with developments that are going to provide overall solutions to their customers, in particular harnessing that value of AI. So, and that's exactly what EngView does. I'd love to hear not only about you and your background, but also introduce folks that listen to the podcast to EngView and what you're doing. So take it away.
Yeah, so thanks for the kickoff and the introduction. Let's just kind of go back just a little bit. I originally learned to program in the 6th grade. I'm 54 years old now, and I ended up getting my degrees in electronics and robotics, and was trying to figure out, where I wanted to be on my mission. And I ended up starting with a company called Multicam when I was 22 years old, and it was an incredible mission. I was the 7th person when I started. We grew it to almost 200 people. We grew 20% a year for 20 years straight. We ended up eventually selling it to a private equity firm. I had taken over as CEO, and then 5 years later, we sold it to another private equity firm. And then if you know anything about private equity, I made it about one more year, and they had a different strategy and a different plan. And that was kind of interesting at the time. I was really devastated, but it was probably a blessing in disguise, because I was way too stressed. I had made that job way too important, and I had a chance to go out and reinvent myself, because I also wasn't a very good contract negotiator at the time, and I was in a nasty non-compete. So you kind of fast forward, and I went out and helped a couple of buddies grow their businesses, this kind of stuff. And I was kind of this mission man in search of a mission. And, after you'd been CEO and that, I really wasn't any good at working for anybody anymore. And so I needed to find a mission where I could lead the mission, didn't necessarily want to go risk my own capital. And, that's kind of how I found EngView. So EngView, come to find out, was this really cool, genius programmers based in Bulgaria, and I had to go look up Bulgaria on the map. I didn't even know where it was, and it's in Eastern Europe. But come to find out, these are mathematicians, computer scientists. They've been working on software for over 25 years, and it was based on artificial intelligence, because it's real complex geometric equations, all this kind of fun stuff. And that was really back then, before anybody even was talking about artificial intelligence, or it was cool. And so you kind of fast forward today, I've been with this company about 3 years, and what I'm learning is, obviously, we're all seeing it now, is artificial intelligence is taking off like crazy. But for us, the foundation of the software and how we use it and all that, and how we basically help customers, we were on the forefront a long time ago, but now the whole world is embracing it, and we're part of that journey.
What I find with folks that are not attached to a company that does what you do, quite often they're familiar with the AI, but only on a very superficial level. They know ChatGPT, they know some Copilot, they know some of these tools, and they know that there's something to be gotten from working within an AI platform, some kind of value. But maybe you could sort of break it down a little bit and talk about the way EngView thinks about AI and really how it's empowering customers. What do they now have the ability to do that they otherwise wouldn't or didn't have before that capability?
Yeah, it's a great question, because a lot of what everybody's used to right now is what we kind of call conversational AI. It's basically you go into a Chat GPT or Gemini or, I forget, Copilot, all these different ones. And you basically kind of have a discussion with it, and it's almost like a new form of a search engine, because basically it's bringing together and it's trying to, help you with answers, help you with data, but at a much higher level. And all that's been kind of made possible by having much faster processors and much more data to search and all that. But then there's also kind of like more deep learning kind of AI where, programs are using it to solve problems and those kind of things. And a great example in EngView software is, let's say that a customer sends you a die line today. They say, hey, I want to make this box. But I don't want it this size. I want it out of a different size and a different material and all that. And in the old days, what you'd have to do is you'd have to go back and you'd have to basically redraw the box, So you'd pull it up into CAD and you'd start changing lines and all that. And it's somewhat painful. But today we search through a database pretty rapidly and we give suggestions and we say, hey, this box is pretty similar to the one you just picked or maybe identical to it. And if you open it up with our software, it's going to allow you to just put in numbers. What's the length? What's the width? I can change the thickness of the material and everything adjusts for you automatically. Or let's say it doesn't get it exact. Well, you can get something that's kind of close. And then because we have this really cool component capability, we can start dragging, let's say, I want a different top on this box, or I want a different bottom. I'd rather have crash lock, or I'd rather have a snap lock or something like that. Well, I can just easily delete that bottom, drag a new bottom in, click it into place, and I'm off and rocking. And so what normally would have taken somebody a lot of time, let's say could be hours, and the room for a lot of human error, we're now doing in minutes, which obviously time is money. Coming back to the problem solving, back to how we are all interacting today, like we use a CRM software, HubSpot, and there's a number of others. Well, now in the CRM itself, it's feeding me suggestions and saying, hey, in your database now of, thousands of customers and another thousands of leads, these are based on your interactions, based on, what's happened. These are probably your best potentials to follow up on. And so, as we're starting to try to close more deals or help more customers or do different things, sifting through all this data manually has always been really difficult, but now we're getting tools fed to us that says, hey, this is maybe how you should start your day or how you should start your week or, how you should solve some sort of problem. And so all that stuff is rapidly changing. But I think the really cool thing that we're on right now too is, think about this as a child. AI is probably 2 years old. It's an infant. How is it going to continue to change? Well, it's going to get a lot older and a lot smarter, a lot faster than the average human that we're used to. And so I think it's all like grab the tiger by the tail, hold on, and this is a ride that if you don't, jump in with, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, and I think, well, at least the way I think about it anyway, is that it's not going to replace humans, because humans are the ones that are logical, more logical maybe than the AI tools, or they can bring in experience that you can't really program into AI. But they're gonna, and they are currently, those AI tools are really taking some of the repetitive, unproductive work out of your day by sort of turbocharging what you're able to do in a given workday. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I think it is. For right now, it'll be fascinating, to see what the future holds. But I heard a great example one time, and they were talking about how the microwave was invented. And so there was this guy, and he was on a nuclear submarine, and he had stuck his candy bar too close to the radar, and his candy bar started melting, and so in the human mind, we're able to kind of deduct and take one idea and maybe introduce it into another idea. In the computer mind, I still don't think that we're anywhere near close to that. But with that said, it is going to drastically change everything. I mean, there's a lot of repetitive tasks. There's a lot of, I hate to say it, I think a lot of the jobs it'll replace are going to be less meaningful jobs. And everybody was super scared when we were all farmers and, the tractor first came along, and they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do with all these people? Because, they all work in the field and we don't know what we're going to do with them. And then I think the same thing came with the Industrial Revolution. So we don't know what it kind of looks like on the other side of the bridge, but at the same time, the human race is pretty resilient, and we're very, very good at reinventing ourselves. So I think that the quality of life will continue to get better. You know, we're not running around in the fields looking for our next meal. You know, we're not using, we have indoor plumbing. You and I are sitting here talking to each other virtually, you know, halfway across the country, and it's just crystal clear as day. And, you know, we couldn't do that, 10 years ago?
Yeah, that's true. I think the technology brings us together in a lot of ways. I think it connects us more than it separates us, which is ultimately what you want it to do. But when it comes to the type of software that you've developed, EngView has developed, what I think is helpful is that improvement of quality of life or quality of and productivity of what's going on in a particular business, because then you can redeploy your resources in a way that's going to make you more profitable, more resilient, more responsive to customer needs. So that's the exciting part for me. You know, it's less about worrying about replacing people, especially in, the packaging industry where it's already difficult to get enough people to run a plant. So hopefully, you'll be able to take the same number of resources, same number of people, and put them to work doing better things that are better for them from a physical and a mental standpoint.
Oh, and that's 100% right too. And it's also, anytime you're taking like information from one area and you're having to re-enter it in another area too, that's just non-valued. Nobody gets excited doing that kind of work. And, some of the other stuff that we're doing that's really cool now is we have a API, and so we can link into your website. We can link into your ERP system. We can pull that out of a spreadsheet. We can do all this kind of stuff. So think about, you get an order for a whole bunch of various size boxes, and you want to just kick that order out of your ERP system and feed that data directly into EngView. It's going to go through and it's going to set the material thickness, the box sizes, the style, all that stuff for you. And then it's going to kick it out where your creative department can now have fun. They can pull up those designs into Adobe Illustrator, and in real time, they can look at the box, they can see it in 3D, they can add their graphics, and that's where it's fun. I mean, that's, if you're a designer, you want to go have fun, you want to use your creativity, you want to put on these cool designs, but you really don't want to spend your time trying to be a structural engineer necessarily and trying to figure out like, okay, how does that glue flap really fit in there? And how do I have to get this little corner fit in there? I mean, we've been doing that for 25 years, so we figured out all that for you where you can go focus your energy on the stuff that's fun.
And you don't have to be a person that's going to print two-dimensional things and get an X-Acto knife and try and glue them together to see what it actually looks, right? You can do it real time, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and there's people that can do that are just incredible, man. I see some of these designs where like some guy made a Jeep the other day all out of corrugated material, and I couldn't do that to save my life, but with the software I could pull it off.
Yeah, that's true. I saw somebody at the Printing United Expo that actually built the dinosaur, like a T-Rex. That's something you would see in a museum of natural history out of corrugated. So the possibilities really are endless, I think.
Yeah, and if you walked around a little bit, you got to see a number of F1 cars of various sizes, and we actually created a fully parametric F1 car of multiple parts and multiple pieces, and it's really cool because you could go in there and you could say, hey, I want my car to be this big and this wide and this long and all this kind of stuff, and you don't have to go redraw all those parts now. It'll do it all automatically for you. We were at a show in Canada, and we made a full-size, or not full-size, but a very large, a 12-foot tall CN tower, from Toronto, and once again, it was all out of the software, but I could never pull that off and do it by hand, like you said.
Well, that's months of, sitting on a CAD trying to, guess. There's a lot of guesswork that goes into that when you're manually doing it, I would guess.
Oh, well, yeah. And see, that's the other thing that a lot of times people don't really think much about is you put all this work into it and then it's like, all right, now I've figured out that this one part is off. And if I got to change this one part, how does it affect all my other parts? Well, the cool little thing about parametrics is I go fix that part and it goes and fixes all the other parts through it for you, and I think that that's the other thing that's like, it is going to take you a little bit of work to do this work, but once it's all talking to each other and all these different parts are talking to each other, then they're fixing each other on the fly, which is really cool.
Which is great because it just cascades throughout the entire design and fixes all the other pieces that have to be fixed to make that change work out, which is great.
Yep. And then go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on the printing side too, the other thing is because we have this really cool plugin for Adobe, this is a common thing that'll happen, is let's say that you create some cool design and you send it off to a customer and the customer's like, oh man, this is great. I like the graphics. I like everything, but I really need that box to be like, an inch longer or a half inch this way, or I'd really rather have you cut it out of B flute and not E flute. Well, all they have to do is open that thing back up in Illustrator, hit a quick resize button, and then not only does the whole design change, the nest change, all the bleed offsets change, and it's all like in a matter of a couple minutes, And so that's back to that whole creativity side. It's back to the automation side. It's back to the, artificial intelligence side that is, making, let's say, more quality of work, but it's actually saving people and customers time and money too, So at the end of the day, it's like, okay, great. If I can go solve these problems real quickly, then I can offer a better product. I can offer it for maybe a better profit, but for less money, which I think all at the end of the day hits your bottom line.
So the next piece of product design that you think about is, once you've got it all planned out, it's the shape you want, it's the strength you want, it's going to do what you need to from a functionality standpoint. How do you figure out the cost of it? What's the cost of goods sold to go into making that particular piece?
That's an excellent question. So we do have a cost estimation module. Couple things you can do real easily is one, as I'm designing this, I know my sheet size, and let's say I know how many I'm going to make, so I feed that information into the software. I know the cost of my sheet. I know roughly the cost of my ink. I know the time it's going to take to print. I got a rough estimate of, how many crease lines there are, how many cut lines there are, all this kind of stuff. So that'll give me a cost. And so then I pump it into the system. It goes through and it basically says, okay, hey, to make this one display that we're working on, if we want to make 30 of them, maybe I need 26 sheets of material. So right off the bat now, I know how many sheets of material I need to buy. I know the cost of my material. I've got an estimate roughly on, what it's going to take to cut. And I got an estimate roughly on how long it's going to take to print and how much material. And so before I ever make one, I can see that. And then the other cool thing is I can send that estimate, and I can also send a 3D virtual model to my customers. So I can just email them and they can open it up on their phone and their browser and they can look at it and see, cool, this is not in 2D what I'm getting ready to get, but it's in 3D. I can see it fold and unfold. And then the world's really gotten even cooler now. I can hit a button called augmented reality and I can set that display in my office, on my counter, wherever. I can see what my product's going to look like on the shelf before I ever make one. So you think in the old days, somebody had to go make one. They had to go make a prototype and then they had to spend time on it and some money, and it's a short run. It's disruptive to production. We're seeing more and more now where people are using the virtual prototype and not even making a physical one.
Because it's so real. The virtual reality is maybe even a misnomer because you can see it as if it's sitting on a store shelf somewhere. Not just even sitting in your office, I would bet.
Yeah, when we were at Printing United, I was going around and I would have somebody, like, let's say a couple people come up to us and I'd have somebody pose in the aisle and they would think they're not standing by anything. And then I'd have the other person with them and I'd take a picture of them with this, virtual display. And then we would bring them back over so they could see it. And they're like looking around, like, that thing was just next to me, and it looks so amazingly real that they couldn't even see it. I have a video on our YouTube channel, a short, where it shows me standing between two displays, and then I walk through one of them, and people are like, "Whoa, that's did you do a magic trick?" And it's like, it just one was there and one wasn't, but it sure looked like it was.
That's amazing. So one other area for the packaging industry that's on their minds quite often, and I think it's on their minds because it's on their customers' minds, is sustainability and reducing waste and carbon footprint and all those things. So, how does the system enable packaging manufacturers to be, that much more efficient and reduce waste and hopefully have, that element of their customer relationship taken care of?
Well, let's hit it from two angles. Let's hit it from the packaging, and then let's come back and hit it from the trade show / POP display stand. So on the packaging side, one of the things that we're doing is, we work on our nesting algorithms. We work on material optimization. We work on, we just had a project yesterday was a great example. And it was like, they wanted a certain display, and it was designed in a certain way, and it was going to take 2 sheets of material. And so we were challenged to come back and say, hey, we'd want to make that display pretty darn similar to what it is, but how do we make it in 1 sheet of material? Because obviously it's, going to save you a bunch of money. And because it's all parametric and we can optimize it, we made some different changes and stuff like that. We were actually able to get it down to use like I swear, I think it was like 92% of that material on that sheet. And so now we went from wasting a fair amount of material on 2 sheets to optimizing that 1 sheet, and that saved us a lot. And it could be the same thing. The other thing we can do is, let's say that you have multiple projects going on for different customers. You can nest multiple projects into the same sheet so that you get a little bit more material optimization. We like to call them filler parts or things like that. But that's another way. And if I'm going to have a certain amount of waste on each sheet, why not just include a second project on that sheet and run it through? The other thing you probably saw at this year's Printing United, and you're going to see it at every show growing, is there's more and more disposable displays. They're using the thicker composite. It's got a number of names like, Reboard or, I don't know, there's all kinds of different names. Falcon board, I think, is another. But anyway, these materials are fairly inexpensive. You can print very high resolution graphics, real high quality on it, but you can bend these things up and fold them and V-groove them and cut them, and you can make chairs and tables and trade show walls and all that. And so that's another area of our software we're expanding, is we're expanding this library of displays. This year at, I think it was FactPack in Germany, we did our entire booth at the Canada Graphics Show a few months back. We did our entire booth there. And that's my plan moving forward is since I sell the software and do this, I'm a little bit behind on myself, is I need to start building my own booths out of this. But, I ran into a time-space continuum problem this go around. So.
See, that's great. On the one hand, I guess if it's a disposable booth or recyclable, maybe that's the best way to put it. Right. It's going to be a lot lighter than a traditional trade show booth. And you only have to ship it one direction as opposed to 2. So right there, I think you're improving the earth in a way by creating a recyclable, piece that you only have to ship, and you're going to cut expenses too. By not having to ship it home or ship it to the next location, you can really just and you can do it on demand, I would guess.
Yeah. So, and you got dredge fees, you got all that. I think in the future, if we really get our act together, there's some big trade show companies, there's display houses all around the company. You could literally send your files over, get it printed locally in Las Vegas or, Atlanta or, Orlando or something like that. And, I've pulled what we did in Canada, and you'll laugh at this, is we got into the show. We got our machinery set up. We had a printer in the booth and we had a cutter in the booth, and we just went ahead and cut out the booth in the booth. So we made it, we just took a stack of material with us and we made it there, I like to say just in time, but it was like just in the nick of time,
That's pretty cool. Well, the nice thing about it too is that you don't have to spend a fortune on a new booth, a new permanent booth, so to speak. Every time you change your logo or every time you update the information that you want printed, it really can be a dynamic thing as your company changes and grows.
Yeah, and think about storage, think about dredge, think about all these other things that you have to do. As my mind goes, on, I think about the future of like even things like self-driving cars and all that. And it's like if we get to the like real automation and the cars are all talking to each other and they're all self-driving, think about it. We don't need parking lots. We don't need parking decks. We don't need, car drops you off. It moves a little bit outside of, the area. It stays idle on the side of the road or picks somebody else up and comes get you. So I think all these things can make us better, can make us greener. I never really thought much when I was younger about being more greener, but as I get older, I like the idea of being safer. I like the idea of, breathing clean air. I like the idea of, maybe less cancer, so I think all these things are good for us,
Yeah, all good things. But, look, if you keep it, keep the thinking closer to home, so to speak, if you can empower your customers to be that much more efficient and effective, dynamic, et cetera, I think there's a lot of benefit there. I also think too that by being a company that does things like you're discussing, you go to a trade show and you create this booth out of corrugated, that in itself is going to get you some attention because it's different. It's really unique.
Oh yeah. And what I've been amazed at too is, the printing technologies come along. I mean, you're printing at such high DPI. The quality of the prints is incredible. So if you're printing on this material versus printing on, like a flexible material, something like that, you're also getting a much bigger bang. You're getting, the graphics are beautiful. It's really changed things. So I think these booths it used to be when they were first coming out, it kind of looked like, yeah, I'm walking into a booth of a cardboard box. That's not attractive. But now when you walk into these booths, they actually look better than a lot of the other booths, which is fascinating.
Yeah, they're not beat up from 4 years of use. And the brand spanking new. They're beautiful. And as I said, when you're doing something a little bit different, that's what attracts somebody to your booth. It's not that you have the most ornate booth necessarily. It's about doing something that's a little off the beaten path that really catches people's eyes and makes you stand out at the trade show.
Yeah, I think we're in this really cool, and it's been this world for obviously a long time, but the only constant is change. It's like, you kind of led off this discussion on, the industry's changing. What are we going to do? How do people adjust to it? And, I'm very technical, and yet at the same time, I've been reading new books. I've been, networking with the right people. I try to, continue to get educated because I don't want to follow behind. But that's the other thing that we're doing on our side too, back to not only having the AI as a core part of the software. We've actually fed in like all our help documents, all the videos that we've created, all this kind of stuff. And now you can even get help inside of our software, as a conversational AI kind of direction. So I say inside through a browser. But I think it's back to people are sometimes scared of some of these tools, or they're worried about what's going to happen in the future and all that. And I think don't get me wrong, there can be possible consequences. We don't want to end up like Terminator or the Matrix or anything else like that. But I think the opposite side is if you don't embrace it and you don't get on board, it's happening without you. You know what I mean? And so we don't know what the future looks like, but I think we know that if you're not embracing this stuff, you won't be part of the future,
For sure. Yeah. And I think you need to motivate people to embrace the change too. A change, or a development might be really interesting and it might have a lot of societal value to it. But at the end of the day, I really feel like we're people, and you need to personalize why it's going to help a particular group of people or a particular segment of the population, and also sell it at the end of the day. And by creating something that's attractive, is going to help sell whatever that proposition is.
Yeah, and I think we're also, you think about like when I first started selling CNC cutting machines, you would meet a lot of older people that were running them, and they were missing a finger or missing this, or, had some sort of, maimed some way from working in a factory or working in production. And I think a lot of the tools that we've developed and a lot of the safety we've developed and all that has not only made a better, cleaner working environment, but it's made a safer working environment. And I think that this next generation of tools that, that happen is maybe we'll end up with less carpal tunnel. Maybe we'll end up with less, there's only so much time you can sit behind a desk without, like I'm at a standing desk right now. So I'm pretty ADD. I like to sit half of the time and stand half the time. But what I'm hoping that the tools do for us is, that we want to enjoy our work. We want to you don't want to necessarily be a slave to work, but you want to keep improving. In theory, every generation's quality of life has gotten better. And, there's a lot of things that obviously we have challenges and political challenges and all this other kind of stuff. But I still believe today that the quality of life today is better because of technology than it was previously.
I think so too. And your tractor analogy, I think, was particularly applicable here. This goes beyond software too. The software empowers robots, for example, and the robots are able to do things that either people don't want to do or things that are really not healthy for people, like lifting strange shaped or heavy objects, for example, loading a board into a cutting machine or into a printer. If you can employ a robot to do that sort of thing and take that experienced person on the floor and maybe with a little bit of training and redirection, put them to work doing something that they're going to enjoy, probably make more money at, et cetera. Everybody sort of wins if you think about it the right way and if the company is willing to make the investment.
I think you're 100% right. I mean, I've worked in the factory, on the factory floor. I used to run around the world and install machines and do all this kind of stuff. And I really feel that, and I know for a fact I've been very lucky to have, avoided some accidents that could have maimed or even killed me. And, I just got lucky. I think as we continue to make things safer, better, like you said, the direction that we're headed in, then, we hopefully more people are protected, not just because they were lucky, just because it's inherent to the design, think about in the early days of industrial automation. I mean, that I'm sure there was a certain percentage of people that were dying just because factories weren't safe. And, think about even like coal mining today or all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just changed drastically because I think, coal mining is done by a lot of automation, and I don't think people are like raising their hands and signing up wanting to be a coal miner anymore,
Yeah, that's true. And again, hopefully you've got the other side of that coin, which is the people that normally would have been attracted to that work are going to have the training and the resources to do something better. But I hear you. It's going to keep us a little bit safer, or hopefully a lot safer. Speaking of that kind of stuff, Kris, what do you see coming down the avenue in 2026 and beyond in terms of new developments with your software at EngView, or new developments in the industry that you think are interesting?
Always love modern day fortune telling. I remember a number of years ago, I was in Las Vegas, and I think it was an ISA show, and there was this speaker. He was great, and I think this is like 20 years ago, and he's like, all right, the future is, big sign companies and printing companies, they're going to mold together, and you're going to have, printed industrial signs and all this kind of stuff. And, everybody's looking at him like he's, cross-eyed. And, now today you look at the average sign company and their sign and printing companies, it's like, hey, this guy's pretty good. I would have liked to looked up his like stock market predictions and, figured out how he did. But yeah, I think that, everything's going to change. I say everything's going to change. I mean, the creativity's going to still be there. You're going to, the equipment's going to get better, faster, smarter. I think you're going to be able to have more conversations with things, like you and I are sitting here talking right now. And right now we're tapping into typing into chat GPT and this kind of stuff. In our software, the future is going to be there where you sit down and you say, instead of like putting these numbers, you're going to say, give me a box that's this size by this size out of this material, and I need it on a 4x8 sheet. And, you're just going to tell it, and it's going to go do it for you, and it's going to go create it, because as AI gets smarter, it can take our I look at it as a do what we mean button. Don't do what I say. I'm going to give you this information, but I'd really like you to do what I mean. This is what I really meant, and I think that we're going to get more do what I mean functionality. I sit here sometimes trying to type things into the search bar, and I don't even really know what I'm looking for, but I get closer and closer, and then eventually it's like, oh wow, I found this thing. And I think that that's the thing, is things are going to get a lot more intuitive. And then once quantum computers marry up with artificial intelligence, it's going to be a dramatic change. Everything is, I think we'll have a true lie detectors. We'll have all these other kind of things that will just change the world. But, on a more near term basis, I think the workflow in a lot of the places we're at, like you said earlier, robots are going to help load machines, and those robots are going to be a lot more cost effective, and we're going to have less injuries. And, and when there's going to be a lot more just in time work, the days of, giant dies and that kind of stuff, producing stuff. I think, some of that's going to be there, but we're seeing more and more. Somebody wants something, short runs, just in time runs, a lot of creativity, a lot of personalization, because it's just getting much easier to do, so I think all that's coming. I think
the cost is coming down on those things too. As the technology evolves, cost tends to come down as well. And so maybe some of that technology and that equipment is going to be more accessible to, smaller manufacturers.
No, I think you're 100% right. I mean, that's where we're having a lot of success, is we're seeing a lot of small shops advance and adopt cool technology you know, I've got a customer just outside of town here, and this guy, Joe, he's great. He had this very successful, or has a very successful events business and doing bounce houses and all this kind of stuff. He does stuff with the Dallas Cowboys and like the Balloon Festival and all that. And now Joe is decided that, you know, he's going to sell that business off and transition. And he wants to, because he's been such a great sales guy, he bought a CNC machine, he got our software, and then he ended up like winning some big box orders because he was just good at, you know, dealing with customers and his connections. And the next thing you know, he's bought other automation, all this, and him and his wife are growing that business and transitioning to a completely different business. So, you know, here's a man and his wife, maybe another person, I think, helping him. They've put in a big, large format printer. They put in a CNC. They put in advanced software. And now they just added like a high production box machine, and he's looking at other machines, you know, and it's just kind of interesting to see that somebody like this that really had no background in this world is coming up to speed pretty rapidly because of technology and automation.
Good to see. And, you know, you might say there's a little bit of democratization of the technology because of the availability, because of the exposure now that you're able to get closer to these things. And again, as the price comes down, but the technology gets better, there's competition in the market, all of those things really come together in a pretty sweet formula, I think, to empower the industry.
Oh, I think you're 100% right. I mean, you know, EngView's been around for 25 years, but in North America, nobody really knew who we were. And, we're kind of like this, you know, big company behind the scenes that, you know, is really a lot of our focus was, you know, doing development for other companies. But the last 3 years, we've been kind of building the name and, you know, growing the market here. And it's fun. And yeah, we like good competition. I mean, what I love about being on, you know, shows like this and kind of spreading the word too is most of the time I think I lose my deals because I'm not invited to the party, you know. Yeah. And so as long as I can get invited to the party, then I'm like, hey, yeah, let's go. But I think you're right. I mean, and we're also seeing huge changes on the front with AI and marketing, you know, so everybody's having to reinvent their SEO. Everybody's having to reinvent how they come to market, all these kind of things, because the normal search engine algorithms are just kind of a thing of the past. And that's all getting reinvented too, which then is changing the rules. So all these big guys that were out there that maybe had an advantage because they had done all this great SEO work. Well, that SEO work isn't working well anymore. So if you're a new guy, you can get on the front and actually start making some progress.
With change comes opportunity, right?
Yeah, so. I love it.
Yep. Well, speaking of getting invited to the party, I would love for you to share how people can get in touch with you or EngView and learn more about what you got.
Excellent. Well, I'm a big LinkedIn fan, so my name's Kris with a K, Hanchette. I'm probably the easiest guy to find on there, or you can just look for EngView. We've got a YouTube channel that's really good. If you just search for EngView Systems, it'll pop up, and we're constantly creating real world videos that answer customers' questions. And, you know, I mean, how I got into that idea is like, you know, let's say something broke on my washer today. I would go, you know, Google the F53 code and go find out how to fix it. Well, we're trying to do the same thing on the software side, so you can find us there. And then you can go to EngView.com. You can look us up there. But, yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And if you come and take a look, we're happy to get you a free trial of the software, and you can play around with it and decide if we're the people you want to date, you know.
Terrific. Well, thanks a lot for sharing. Our conversation went pretty far afield in a good way, beyond just software today. I love your insights. I love what you're able to do to empower your customers. So thanks a lot for sharing all of that today with us, Kris.
Hey, it was a pleasure, man. Thanks for the invitation, and I look forward to being back on.
That sounds great. I hope you will. So this has been Kris Hanchette, the president of EngView Systems, and sharing some great insights, as I said, about what his company is doing and what's out there in the marketplace. And I'm Kris Santomassimo, today's host of the Think Factory podcast. We'll see you next time.